y'all, welcome to another installment of my beginner series. This time I'm going to teach you how to do a circle, and what you will need is a stitch marker, and I'll show you how to use that. And then I have a G hook, and that's a 4.25 millimeter G hook. And what I'm using is just yellow yarn, because yellow is the best color in the world. Okay, so you can refer back to my chain video, and in my chain video I'll show you how to put the yarn on the hook. So I'm going to do that really quick, and then I'll do it again because sometimes I have to do it 2 or 3 times. Alright, then for a circle, when you do a circle, you're going to be working in a magic ring. So in a magic ring, you're basically getting it on the hook, but it's like a very loose little circle. And so what we do is we're going to chain 2. So that's what I did. 1 chain, 2nd chain, 1 chain, this is the 2nd chain. Okay. And then what we do, when you're working a circle, obviously you're going to be working this way. And so you start with this first little ring here. It's open and it has enough room. So what you do, you can refer back to my single crochet video if you're unsure of how to do a single crochet, but you'll do a single crochet, and there's your first one. And when you make a circle, you'll have to do a series of 6 single crochets in a circle. So that's what we're gonna do. We just did 1, so we do 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. And what we do at this point, here's our first one we did. And you see it's starting to form a circle now. So we're going to stick our hook there, pull up a loop, and continue pulling that same loop through. And you made a slip stitch, and you pull this little string tight, and that closes up that little hole, and you got your first row in your little tiny circle. Isn't it cute? But we want a bigger circle. So if we want a bigger circle, now we're at that point where we start to increase. So we're going to chain 1. Okay. So now in this stitch that's right directly underneath this chain 1, we're going to insert the hook there. Pull up a loop, yarn over. So that's 1 single crochet, and then 2. That second one, we're going to put it in that same space there. So we do 2. In a pattern for a circle, in order to increase, you have to do 2 single crochets in each one around. So let's do that. 1, 2. Okay, and we're at the end of our row here. And what you will see here is we have 2, 2, 2, 2, and I did that wrong. So we have 2, because we're doing 2 stitches in each one. And so when you count them, so that you know that you have the right amount of single crochets in there, is you do, there should be 6, so because you just did this first row of 6. So you're doing 2 in each one of those. So there'll be 6 couplings of 2 here. So you'll see them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that's how you can tell how many increases you have for that row. Okay, so the second row, and here's a point where you're going to be using your stitch marker here. So we'll get it ready. And so this is the first stitch of the row below. And so we're going to insert our hook there, pull up a loop, and finish out our first single crochet of our third row. So we put our little marker in there, like so. So you can tell which stitch is your first stitch that you worked for that round. Okay, so in a pattern for a circle, you do 2 single crochets in the first stitch, 1 single crochet in the next stitch. And so that's a repeat pattern that you're going to do all the way around. So let's continue with that. 2 single crochets in one stitch, then 1 single crochet in the next stitch, 2 single crochets in one stitch, 1 single crochet in the next stitch, and then we're going to repeat that all the way around. Okay, we ended with the 1 single crochet. So we're back at the beginning of our row here, or around. So what you do next at this point, and what I like to do, I just like to put my hook down and I count my stitches just to make sure that it's even and it doesn't start to buckle, because otherwise it's not going to lay flat. So what I like to do, we know this is our first stitch, and we know that in our first stitch we did 2, and you can actually look at it and see that you worked 2 single crochets in this one stitch. And another tip I'm going to give you too, since in the beginning in your very first row you started with 6 single crochets, so when you're trying to count these stitches and make sure you increase in the right amount of single crochets, you know that you're always going to have 6 increases in your circle. No matter what row you're in, it's always going to be 6. So what I like to do is I like to count the double single crochet stitches, and that makes it a little bit easier, because what's important is not how many stitches you have in between those stitches, but just make sure you have the right amount of increases. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we know that we did this row correct. So now we move on to the next row, which is our 4th row. So what we do is I like to remove the stitch marker, then start out my first stitch in that row, and then we do 2 in that. So let me show you again. So that's 1 single crochet we just did. Now we're doing our second. Okay, and then when you do row number 4, it's 2 single crochets in one stitch, and then 1 single crochet in the next 2 stitches. Okay, 2 single crochets in one stitch, and then 1 single crochet in the next 2 stitches. So we're going to repeat that pattern all the way around and finish out our round here. Okay, 1 and ending with 2 single crochets. Okay, so I like to put that hook down, and I know I got my increases here. So I got 1 increase here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Like I said, it's always going to be 6 increases. Okay, So now we're getting into our 5th row here. We take out the marker, sit it down, do our first stitch, our first single crochet, put our marker in there, and then do our 2nd single crochet in that first stitch. So in the first stitch you do 2 single crochets. Okay, and this row calls for 2 single crochets in one stitch and then 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches. So there you go. Now we do 2 single crochets in a stitch, the next stitch, and then we do 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches. And then we'll repeat that pattern all the way around this round until we meet up with this marker. Okay, finishing out our row number 5, we end with 1, 2, 3 single crochets, and now we count our stitches. We have 2 here, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so now let's start with our 6th row or round. We pull out that stitch marker. Okay, do our first single crochet, put the stitch marker back in so you don't lose your place, and finish off that one stitch with another stitch. So we have 2 single crochets in the first stitch there. And then for round number 6, we have 2 single crochets in the first stitch, and then we do 1 single crochet in the next 4 stitches. So I just did 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we repeat that with 2 single crochets and then 4 single crochets in the next 4 stitches here. 2, 3, and 4, and let's repeat that pattern all the way to the end. Okay, finishing out our row number 6 with 2 single crochets there and then 1 single crochet in the next 4 stitches. And there you go. That hook down and count these stitches. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and each one of them have 4 stitches in between each one of those increases. And then as you can see, it's round and it's starting to flatten out, so it's like completely flat. And that's the beauty of the increases. That's what makes it so that it's so flat. So in our 7th row here, take that marker out, do your first single crochet, put the marker back in, boom. Okay, and then do your next single crochet. That's 2 single crochets in that first stitch there, and then we do 1 single crochet in the next 5 stitches. So that's 3, 4, and 5. And then we do 2 single crochets in the next stitch and just repeat the pattern over again. Single crochet in the next 5 stitches. Okay, finishing out our 7th row with 2 single crochets and then 1 single crochet in the next 5 stitches. How many do I have? 3, 4, come on now, 4, and then 5. Put the hook down while I fix my yarn. What in the world? So this happens when you have those, when you use these metal hooks. really not a fan of metal hooks, because what happens is it separates the yarn very easily, and so you have it like separates them a little bit. But they're all metal hooks, so all right, put that hook down. Then we have one increase here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and each one of them has 5 single crochets in between them. Okay, so now we're getting into our last increase row here, and this is our 8th row. So let me get that first single crochet in there, put the stitch marker in, and then do our second single crochet in there. So we got 2 single crochets in the first stitch like all the other rows, and then we have to work 6 single crochets in between these increases. So 3, 4, 5, and 6. We increase. Another little tip I want to show you too is when you start to increase and you're evenly increasing, and this is another way that you can tell that you are increasing in the right areas and you have the right amount of single crochets in between the increases. And most of the time when I'm doing a circle, I don't count because of this. When I find that when I need to increase, I'm right, I don't know if I can get you to see this. There is 2 single crochets right here. And then I'm starting on this row here is another 2 single crochets. So whenever you're increasing and you're doing your increased rows, you always end up working 2 single crochets in the same first stitch of the 2 single crochet increase from the row below. So that's what I've been finding too. When you do enough circles, you start to find, okay, I wouldn't really need to count all that much. I can just go and then I can just look at it and say, oh, I need to increase right here. You just have to pay attention a little bit more. Like I'm not counting right now, but boom, I can see I have an increase right here in that first stitch. So I know that I need to increase by doing 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So continue with that pattern all the way till you meet the stitch marker on the other side. 1. Okay, we're ending out our row 8, which has 2 single crochets in the first stitch and then 1 single crochet in the next 6 stitches. So 5 and then 6. And there you go. Okay. Got that stitch marker so you know that you have an increase right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You can also look at it, another tip too, is you can see that it's not a perfect circle here. So you can see it kind of like points right here. These are where the increases are. There's a point and then here's the stitch marker, so you know that there is a increase right here. So there's a little point right here, so that's an increase, and then these 2 are increases also. So what I find that's easy for you to be able to get that perfect circle look, what I would do is I'll do 1 more row of just a even single crochet, no increases or anything like that. So I'll put the stitch marker so I don't know that I'm not going to go overboard my single crochets, because if I do, it will start to turn in. So just for this last row, get your practice with a little bit of single crochet just evenly around the edge till you meet up with the stitch marker on the other side. Okay, so we're finishing out our row here. This is our 9th row. So, and as you can see, those points that I showed you at the beginning of this row are virtually gone. You can't really see them. And it's more smooth circle around the edge. This is the, so there you go. You just made a circle. You can use this technique. I showed you in a single crochet, but you can also use this technique with a double crochet, half double crochet. Be sure to add this video to a playlist so you can watch it again, start it, fast forward it, pause, all that good jazz. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to click that little bell thingy so you can get notifications when I put up another video. And as always, thank you so much for watching.